Orphaned mechanic fixed a vintage car, unknowingly fulfilling his father's dying wish. The words echoed in Ethan's mind as he traced his fingers along the rusted frame of the 1967 Mustang Fastback that had just been towed into his small garage. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his life fixing other people's treasures while his own remained irreparably broken. The December air slipped through the gaps in the weathered garage door, carrying with it the scent of impending snow. Ethan pulled his worn denim jacket tighter around his shoulders, his breath forming small clouds that disappeared as quickly as they came. Just like everything else in his life, fleeting, temporary, gone. This one's different, his friend and tow truck driver Marco had said when he dropped it off. Owner passed away. Nephew wants to see if it's worth salvaging or if he should just scrap it. Ethan circled the vehicle slowly, taking in its faded Highland green paint, the collapsed driver's seat, the cracked dashboard. Cars told stories. Ethan had learned that early on. This one spoke of neglect, but beneath the damage he could sense something more. A history, a purpose, something that resonated within him for reasons he couldn't explain. At 32, Ethan Miller was known throughout Riverdale as the mechanic who could resurrect the dead. Automotive-wise, at least. What most didn't know was that he'd been orphaned at 16, when his father's pickup truck had skidded off Willow Creek Bridge during a thunderstorm. The same storm that had kept Ethan waiting at school, angry that his dad was late picking him up. His last words to his father had been spoken in anger over the phone. "Just forget it. I'll walk home." He never got the chance to say goodbye. His mother had been gone long before that, cancer taking her when Ethan was just 7. The memories of her were soft-edged photographs in his mind. The scent of lavender, hands that never seemed to stop moving, a laugh that made you feel like you were the center of her universe. Ethan slid his hand along the Mustang's hood, fingers catching on the pockmarks of rust. "What's your story, old girl?" he murmured. His small garage, Miller's Auto Repair, was all he had now. The foster care system had been a series of temporary homes until he'd aged out, carrying nothing but his father's toolbox and a determination to be self-sufficient. The garage had been a foreclosure he'd purchased with every penny he'd saved, working double shifts at the local gas station throughout his 20s. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his back pocket before answering. "Miller's Auto. Mr. Miller? This is James Harrington. My uncle's Mustang was delivered to you today." "Yes, sir. Just looking it over now." "Oi, what's the verdict? Worth fixing, or should I just sell it for parts?" Ethan glanced back at the car, feeling an inexplicable pull toward it. Hard to say without a deeper inspection. "Engines seized. Bodywork needs significant attention. It'll be costly." A pause on the other end. "My uncle left specific instructions about that car in his will, but I don't have the time or money to deal with it. If you think it's worth salvaging, I'm willing to sell it to you for what I can get in scrap. Otherwise, I'll have it towed to the junkyard." Ethan's heart quickened. He didn't need another project. He barely had time for paying customers, but something about the Mustang called to him. Like a whisper he couldn't quite make out, but felt compelled to listen for. "I'll take it," he said, surprising himself. "Who was your uncle?" "Harold Bennett. Lived over on Oak Ridge until the nursing home. Don't think you'd know him. He hadn't driven in years." The name meant nothing to Ethan, yet he felt disappointed somehow. "I'll send payment today." After hanging up, Ethan stood before the Mustang again. It would take months of work, money he shouldn't spend, time he didn't have. Yet as the snow began to fall outside, dusting the world in quiet possibility, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose that transcended logic. "Looks like it's just you and me now," he said to the car, already mentally cataloging what he would need to bring it back to life. "So fucking..." The letter arrived 3 weeks later, forwarded by James Harrington. Ethan had already stripped the Mustang down to its frame, spending every evening after closing the shop to paying customers working on his personal project. The engine block sat on a stand, partially disassembled, revealing years of neglect and improper storage. The envelope was yellowed with age, the handwriting shaky but deliberate. Ethan opened it with grease-stained fingers, leaning against his workbench. "Mr. Miller, if you're reading this, then my nephew has honored my request to offer you my Mustang. I've followed your career from a distance for many years. Your reputation for restoring what others deem beyond saving reminds me of someone I once knew, a man who believed anything could be fixed with enough patience and the right tools. The car has been in my possession since 1985. It was once something special to me, but time and circumstance prevented me from giving it the care it deserved. I hope in your hands it might find its purpose again. There is a small compartment beneath the driver's seat that contains something that may interest you. Consider it payment for taking on this burden. With respect and gratitude, Harold Bennett. Ethan read the letter twice, confusion furrowing his brow. He'd never met Harold Bennett. Why would the man have followed his career? And what could possibly be hidden in a car that had sat neglected for decades? Setting the letter aside, Ethan moved to the partially dismantled interior. The driver's seat was propped against the wall. He knelt beside it, running his fingers along the underside until he felt a small latch. With a click, a compartment no larger than a paperback book opened. Inside was a small leather pouch, worn with age. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he opened it, dumping the contents into his palm. A silver pocket watch gleamed in the overhead light, along with a folded photograph and a small key. The pocket watch was tarnished but intact, its face protected by a glass cover that had somehow survived the years. When Ethan pressed the release, the cover sprang open to reveal not just a watch face, but an inscription inside. To Daniel Miller, my son. Time passes but love remains. Dad, 1967. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Daniel Miller, his father's name. With unsteady fingers, he unfolded the photograph. The colors had faded, but the image was clear enough. Two young men standing proudly beside a brand new 1967 Mustang Fastback in Highland Green. One of them was unmistakably a younger version of the man in the photo Ethan kept of his father on his bedside table. The other, he presumed, was Harold Bennett. The world seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. He lowered himself to the floor of his garage back against the workbench, staring at the photo as snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in silence. They were best friends, Martha Collins explained, pouring Ethan another cup of coffee in her small kitchen. At 78, Martha had been his father's high school English teacher, and one of the few connections to his past that Ethan had maintained. Harold and your father were inseparable from elementary school through high school. They bought that Mustang together the summer they graduated, split the cost and shared it. Ethan stared at the old yearbook Martha had pulled from her bookshelf. There they were, Harold and Daniel, arms slung over each other's shoulders, young and unaware of what life would bring. What happened between them? Ethan asked, his coffee growing cold. Martha's eyes clouded with something, hesitation perhaps. Life happened. Your father met your mother that same summer. Harold enlisted in the army. By the time Harold returned from Vietnam, your parents were married and you were on the way. She paused. There was a disagreement. Something about the car. Your father gave up his half to Harold and they stopped speaking. They never reconciled. Martha shook her head slowly. Pride is a terrible thing, Ethan. By the time they might have been ready, too many years had passed. When your father died, I attended the funeral. Harold was there, standing at the back. He never came forward. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to process this new piece of his father's history. And now he's left me his car. Harold never married, never had children. After your father died, he used to come to your high school football games. He'd sit in the top row, watch you play. I think he was trying to keep a promise to your father in his own way. The revelation struck Ethan like a physical blow. All those years he'd felt completely alone. Someone had been watching over him from a distance. Someone who had known his father when they were young, full of dreams and possibilities. There's more, Martha said gently. After your father's accident, Harold was the one who bought his toolbox at the estate sale. He told me he wanted to make sure it stayed in good hands. I'm guessing those tools eventually found their way back to you? Ethan nodded, remembering how his last foster father had presented him with the familiar red toolbox on his 18th birthday, claiming he'd tracked it down. He'd never questioned it, too grateful to have this piece of his father back. Why wouldn't he just introduce himself to me? Ethan asked, a hint of anger coloring his voice. Martha reached across the table, her papery hand covering his. Some men find it easier to fix engines than their own mistakes, Ethan. Sound familiar? Winter deepened as Ethan threw himself into restoring the Mustang. The project became an obsession, a conversation with ghosts. Every seized bolt he loosened, every panel he straightened, felt like unraveling a message meant just for him. He'd taken to talking to the car as he worked, telling it about his day, his childhood memories of his father, the questions he wished he could ask. Sometimes in the quiet of the garage, with only the sound of his tools and the occasional ping of the cooling metal for company, Ethan could almost imagine the car was listening. The small key from the hidden compartment had opened a storage unit across town. Inside, Ethan had discovered a treasure trove. Original parts for the Mustang, carefully wrapped and preserved, along with service manuals, documentation, and a leather-bound journal filled with Harold's neat handwriting, a detailed log of the car's history and the adventures he and Daniel had shared in it. Through February's bitter cold, Ethan read the journal each night after working on the car, piecing together a friendship he'd never known existed. The entry stopped abruptly in 1973, resuming briefly in 1985 with just one line: "Daniel's gone. The car is just mine now in every way." The next entry wasn't until 2010, "Saw Daniel's boy today. He's opened his own garage. Like father, like son. He has Daniel's hands, a mechanic's hands. I wonder if he'd recognize the car if he saw it. I wonder if he'd recognize what it meant to us." As March arrived, bringing with it the first hesitant signs of spring, Ethan made a discovery that stopped him cold. While reinstalling the glove compartment, his fingers brushed against something taped to the back of it. A small, sealed envelope with his name written on it in the same shaky handwriting as Harold's letter. Ethan sat in the partially restored driver's seat, the envelope heavy in his hands. Outside, rain tapped gently against the garage roof, a soothing rhythm that belied the storm brewing inside him. Whatever this envelope contained, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving. With careful fingers, he broke the seal. "Ethan, if you're reading this, then you've come further with the restoration than I dared hope. There's something you should know about this car, and about your father and me. The night your father died, we had finally agreed to meet. After 16 years of silence, he called me. The Mustang, our Mustang, had been sitting in my garage for years. He said it was time we restored it together, like we'd always planned. He was on his way to see me when his truck went off Willow Creek Bridge. I've carried that knowledge like a stone ever since. If I hadn't agreed to meet him that night, in that storm, perhaps he would still be here. Perhaps you would have had your father to guide you through growing up. When I learned you'd become a mechanic, I knew what I had to do. Your father's dying wish, though he never said it in those exact words, was to restore our friendship through restoring this car. I'm too old now to do the work, but you have his gift. My final wish is that you complete what your father and I never could. Make this car whole again. When you do, you'll find one last thing hidden where only a true mechanic would look. I may have failed your father in life, but I hope through you, I can fulfill the promise of our friendship. Harold." Ethan read the letter 3 times, each reading bringing fresh tears that he didn't bother to wipe away. All these years, he'd blamed himself for his father's death, for the angry words, for making him drive in the storm. He'd never known his father had been on his way to reconcile with an old friend, to rebuild something they had once shared, where only a true mechanic would look. Ethan murmured, eyes scanning the car's interior. His father had taught him the basics before he died: where to check the oil, how to change a tire. But it was Ethan's own determination that had turned that basic knowledge into skill, his need to connect with his father's memory that had driven him to understand engines the way Daniel once had. The answer came to him suddenly. He moved to the engine bay, now clean and partially reassembled. The engine block itself, the heart of the car, specifically the cylinder head, which he hadn't yet reinstalled. In his workbench drawer, Ethan found the cylinder head he'd carefully cleaned and reconditioned. He turned it over in his hands, examining every inch until he found it. A small section that had been welded shut and then carefully machined to look original. With delicate precision, Ethan used a cutting tool to open the hidden compartment. Inside was a small metal box, no larger than a deck of cards. When he opened it, a single key rested on a bed of faded velvet alongside a slip of paper with an address. The address led to a storage facility on the outskirts of town. The owner, an elderly man named Frank, nodded in recognition when Ethan presented the key. "Been waiting a long time for someone to claim that unit," he said. "Mr. Bennett paid for 50 years in advance back in '85. Still has about 15 to go." The storage unit was small, climate-controlled, and contained just one item: a large object covered by a custom-fitted car cover. Ethan's heart pounded as he carefully removed it, revealing a 1967 Mustang Fastback identical to the one in his garage. Except this one was pristine, perfectly maintained, its Highland green paint gleaming under the storage unit's lights. On the windshield was an envelope. Inside, a registration in his father's name and a note in Harold's handwriting. This was always Daniel's half of our dream. He sold it to me when you were born, saying a family man needed something more practical than a sports car. I never had the heart to sell it or change it. Your father's fingerprints are still on the steering wheel. Now it's yours along with its twin. One broken, one preserved, together they make a whole, just like your father and I could have been. The key is in the ignition. It still runs perfectly. I've made sure of that. Ethan's hands trembled as he opened the driver's door. The scent of leather and a faint trace of Old Spice, his father's cologne, enveloped him. When he slid into the seat, it felt like an embrace from the past. The key turned easily in the ignition. The engine awakened with a powerful rumble that seemed to reach inside Ethan's chest and grip his heart. Tears blurred his vision as he rested his hands on the steering wheel, exactly where his father's had once been. By summer, both Mustangs gleamed side by side in Ethan's garage. The restored one, Harold's car, had taken 4 months of dedicated work. Every bolt, every wire, every stitch in the upholstery had been a meditation on connection, on the ties that bind people even across time and death. Word had spread throughout Riverdale about Ethan's project and the story behind it. People stopped by the garage to see the cars, to hear the tale of friendship, estrangement, regret, and ultimate reconciliation through the next generation. Among the visitors was a young woman named Lily Chen, a photographer documenting small-town American stories for a digital magazine. She'd asked to photograph the cars and interview Ethan about the restoration process. It's not just about the cars, Ethan explained as Lily adjusted her camera settings. The evening sun slanted through the open garage door, casting the Mustangs in golden light. It's about completion, fulfilling a circle that was broken. Lily nodded, snapping a photo of Ethan's hand resting on the fender of the restored Mustang. And has it helped? With your grief, I mean. Ethan considered this, looking between the two identical cars. One that had been preserved in memory of his father, one that he had brought back from the brink of destruction with his own hands. I used to think grief was something you eventually moved past. Now I understand it's more like these cars. Something you maintain, restore, learn to live with. The pain doesn't disappear, but it becomes purposeful. Lily lowered her camera, studying him with dark, perceptive eyes. That's beautiful. And what will you do with them now? Drive them, Ethan said simply. Cars aren't meant to sit still. Neither are people. After Lily left, promising to send him copies of the photos, Ethan remained in the garage as twilight deepened. He ran his fingers along the contours of both vehicles, feeling the connection between past and present, between what was lost and what had been found. That night, Ethan drove Harold's restored Mustang along the winding road that led to Willow Creek Bridge. He parked at the lookout point above the spot where his father's truck had gone into the water 16 years earlier. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like bright possibilities. From his pocket, Ethan withdrew his father's pocket watch, the one Harold had kept all those years. He opened it, reading the inscription once more. Time passes, but love remains. I finished it, Dad, he said aloud. I fixed what was broken. The watch ticked steadily in his palm, marking the passage of time that separated him from his father, yet somehow also connecting them. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the night breeze against his face, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant rain. For the first time since his father's death, the weight of guilt lifted from Ethan's shoulders. His father's last journey hadn't been fueled by Ethan's angry words, but by the hope of reconnection, of rebuilding something valuable that had been lost. In restoring Harold's car, Ethan had unknowingly completed that journey. Autumn came to Riverdale in a blaze of color. Business at Miller's Auto Repair had never been better. Ethan's restoration of the Mustangs had earned him a reputation beyond just being a good mechanic. People brought him their heirlooms, their projects, their dreams disguised as vehicles. Lily Chen had returned too, first professionally for follow-up photos, then personally with a vintage camera that had belonged to her grandfather, wondering if Ethan might help her restore it. Their conversations stretched from afternoons into evenings, from professional to personal, from cautious to comfortable. On a crisp October morning, Ethan made a decision. He called Martha Collins and asked for her blessing. It's what both of them would have wanted, she assured him, voice warm with approval. The following weekend, Ethan drove both Mustangs to Oak Ridge Cemetery. With Lily's help, he parked them side by side near the quiet corner where his father was buried. Then, carrying a small garden shovel and a potted oak sapling, he made his way to the fresh grave of Harold Bennett, who had passed away just weeks after Ethan had completed the restoration. I thought they should be together again, Ethan explained to Lily as he began to dig a small hole beside Harold's headstone. The cars, I mean. Just for today. Lily nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. She took photos as Ethan carefully planted the sapling, patting the soil around its base with the same gentle precision he used when handling delicate engine components. I never got to thank him, Ethan said, rising and dusting off his hands, for watching over me from a distance, for keeping my father's dreams safe until I could fulfill it. I think he knew, Lily said softly, lowering her camera. Some things don't need words. They stood in silence, the autumn breeze rustling through the cemetery's trees, carrying with it a few early falling leaves that danced around the gleaming Mustangs before settling on the ground. Later, as the sun began its descent, Ethan took both sets of keys from his pocket. One he placed on his father's headstone. The other he set upon Harold's fresh grave. I'm donating the cars to the Riverdale Historical Society, he explained to Lily as they walked back toward the vehicles, with the condition that they always be displayed together with the full story of their history. They belong to the town now, to the story of this place and its people. And what will you do? Lily asked, her hand finding his. Ethan looked back at the graves, at the keys glinting in the fading sunlight, at the small oak that would grow over the years, its roots binding the two friends together beneath the earth. I'm going to build something new, he said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. But I'll remember what they taught me, that it's never too late to fix what's broken, that love remains even when time passes, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give is completion. As they drove away from the cemetery, Ethan in his father's preserved Mustang, and Lily following in Harold's restored one, Ethan felt a sense of peace he'd never known before. Through the rearview mirror, he could see both headstones growing smaller in the distance, the keys left behind catching the last rays of sunlight like promises kept. He turned his eyes to the road ahead, hands steady on the steering wheel where his father's had once been, carrying forward a legacy restored, not just of metal and machinery, but of connection, forgiveness, and love that transcended time. The orphaned mechanic had fixed more than just a vintage car. He had mended a broken circle, fulfilled a father's dying wish, and in doing so repaired his own heart.